We're gonna rotate anyway. So we'll rotate. Yeah, yeah.
But it was usual. There was no conversation. They look cool though. If you're really good, they look cool.
They're waiting to look. She's gonna come in and put the times here. And then what we do is we rotate 3 seconds. Doing it. A few rotations are 30. Just, we're just gonna go on.
Too early for them.
your ID? Okay. Okay. Can I switch you on ID? Okay. Yeah. Are you okay to do second round? Okay.
I think that's for you.
Yeah. Just let you guys know, photographers, we're gonna rotate every 30 to 45 seconds.
Okay.
All right. And we're just gonna go in the clockwise position. You there, you there.
From here, from here where?
Stop.
On the top.
Yeah.
And
And
then
then Sarah will look here, and they'll
left.
move here, and they'll just rotate.
They're in the green room, guys.
Okay.
Second one. Hey, actually, Sarah, when we switch, you're gonna go that way.
Okay.
So then you're gonna come this, you're just gonna go to this spot. Okay.
Okay.
So we're just gonna go, photographers, we're just gonna go in a
That's not like
clockwise position. Yeah,
the mat.
Yeah.
And from here to here.
there to there. Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, we're full. You gotta come this
So
around.
I'm going to your place. I'm
Yeah.
going to your place.
Yeah.
And then there.
I'm going there. I'm going there.
You're gonna go behind the door? No, well, we have someone in that spot, so. Oh, wait. We have a lot of stuff right now. So I just don't have anything on the stuff.
Heads up.
Good morning, everyone. We gather here today in the midst of our negotiations on how we can defeat the virus, how we can keep people employed, how we can put money in the pockets of the American people. To do so in a way that is values-based and can be done with the most, shall we say, what would be the word, bipartisanship possible. That is our goal. It's what we have done 4 times already with COVID bills, 4 times, all bipartisan. Of course, we need that because we have to have a signature from the president and a vote in the United States Senate. But we have stand by our HEROES Act, the HEROES Act, which does just that, keeps people working, our heroes, healthcare workers, first responders, sanitation, transportation, etc. Contain the virus by testing, tracing, treatment, and masks, separation, etc. And third, putting money in the pockets of the American people. Those are the pillars of the HEROES Act. We have a few other pillars. That is it's about protecting the lives, the livelihood, and the life of our democracy. And in that score, we have some issues in terms of the census, in terms of the post office, postal service, and in terms of on voting. Uh, at home, we say, but if you want to say vote by mail, whatever the terminology, voting in a way that does not make people have to choose between their health and their vote. It's again the health of our democracy in more than one way. We have been making some progress, proceeding in a positive way. We're not there yet. I have said I see a light at the end of the tunnel. We just don't know how long the tunnel is. But we have to move quickly, more quickly, because the light at that end of the tunnel may be the freight train of the virus coming at us if we do not act to contain it. We're concerned because we think that this administration and the Republicans do not understand the gravity of the situation and hence have not taken the actions to stop the spread of the virus, to again open the economy, have our schools open safely, and have us return to some normalcy. I'm very honored to be here with the distinguished Democratic leader of the Senate. We've worked in sync on this with shared values, but with shared understanding that we want to come to agreement. And with that, I'm just pleased to yield to the distinguished leader of the United States Senate, welcome him back to the House side where he served with distinction. I can speak firsthand on that because I served on the banking committee where he was like in the top row and I was in the bottom row. And now he's the leader in the Senate. Yield to Mr. Schumer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and it's great to be here. Now, it's 83 days since the House passed the HEROES Act. At that point, Speaker Pelosi and I called on the leader, McConnell, to start negotiations on COVID, and we called on him 3 weeks before all these July deadlines. But for 2 months, Leader McConnell has said, pause, wait and see, let's assess the situation. So what is keeping us apart? Why haven't we come to an agreement? It's because our Republican friends don't seem to see the gravity of the situation, the great crisis that we're in, the greatest economic crisis for 100 years, for 75 years since the Great Depression, the greatest economic healthcare crisis for 100 years. The bottom line is this: the Trump administration and Senate Republicans have badly mauled the body politic, the American economy, and American healthcare. And we believe the patient needs a major operation while Republicans want to apply just a Band-Aid. We won't let them just pass the Band-Aid, go home, and leave America bleeding. It's that simple. That's the difference. That's the difference. There are huge problems out there, but so many of the Republicans don't want to do anything. Let's not spend any government money when people are hurting so badly. The president just dithers. This is the greatest crisis we've probably had in so many years, and one of the 5 or 6 greatest crises America has ever had. And there is no leadership from the president. He says one thing one day, another thing another day, and another thing another day. He's not focused on this. No leadership. History will guard this as one of the most appalling performances by any chief executive anywhere in the world in all of history. It's true. It's that serious. So the reason our negotiations with the White House have been so arduous is they just don't see the needs out there, and they don't want to do anything about them. They want to get away with as little as possible, so their right-wing ideologues who don't want to spend any government money will not be angry with them. They don't understand the crisis in the country. They don't understand its depth. They don't understand its breadth. They don't understand the suffering. Our Republican counterparts refuse to acknowledge that Americans, through no fault of their own, have lost their jobs, might need some help, some money to help pay the rent. The Republican leader thinks the biggest threat to our country is an epidemic of lawsuits that hasn't materialized. What will materialize soon is an epidemic of evictions, unless we extend the moratorium and pass rental assistance. You can't extend the moratorium without giving people some help. Between 19 and 23 million households, that's 1 in 5 rental households, will be at risk of eviction by September. And when the moratorium ends and they owe 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months rent and they don't have money, there will be massive evictions. Our Republican colleagues refuse to acknowledge that state, local, tribal governments, who the Trump administration abandoned in the early days of this crisis for ideological reasons, might need federal support to prevent teachers and firefighters and bus drivers from being laid off. Over 1 million have already been laid off, and the number, from all they tell us, will greatly increase. Our Republican counterparts refuse to acknowledge running an election in the middle of a pandemic is difficult when so many more people will vote by mail, and voting, excuse me, and voting in person is also more difficult. Yesterday, the Republican leader scoffed at the idea of extending enhanced unemployment benefits because he said it would mean that Americans without work would be paid more than essential workers. Well, in our bill, we say pay the essential workers more. They reject it. If our friends are worried about how little essential workers are making, join us in supporting our frontline pay provisions. When it comes to our schools, food assistance for the hungry children, for the post office, for the census, and mind-bogglingly, when it comes to health care, testing, the great shortage of testing and tracing, they want to pinch pennies. Again, they'd like to get away with passing the skinniest, most minimal bill possible and go home and wash their hands of it. We can't do that because it will leave Americans hurting and not get us out of the crisis, which is our job. We've had huge problems brought on by a failed president who tries to sweep the problems under the rug and deny they exist. We Democrats will not give up on America. We're not walking away. Speaker Pelosi, yesterday, evidently, Mr. Meadows said at the Republican lunch he's going to quit as of Friday. He got such heat for that, he backed off. Well, we're not quitting. We're ready to work. We will keep working. And as long as it takes, as the speaker said in her tunnel analogy, as long as it takes to reach an agreement, we will keep working and working and working until we get it done. Democrats have been ready to work. Republicans have stalled for 4 months. If Republicans in the White House want to throw up their hands, walk away from the table, that's on them, but we don't want them to do it. The American people are going to remember who was ready to meet their needs and who was ready to continue negotiating in good faith.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. As you can see, the Democrats in the Congress are unified in our commitment, values-based commitment to America's working families. At the same time, the Republicans are in disarray. Probably half of them won't vote for anything, not $1. I always see everything, as you know, through the eyes of the children. And through the eyes of the children, this is what we see and say to the Republicans: don't nickel and dime our children. Don't say we want to get a tax break to a business lunch and not give more money for children to have food stamps and the rest. Don't talk about saying that if they go to school, only if school is open will we put federal dollars there. No, we have on authority and documented that to virtual, actual, and hybrid for education is approximately the same, it's within range of the same cost. So why should you demand that our children take a risk in a community of high incidence of the infection that they have to go to school in order to get federal dollars? Families, millions of children are food insecure. That's why we make such an issue of how can they possibly, what did we have? Over $60 billion for food in one way or another, whether it was women, infant and children, whether it's one form of food nutrition or another, including food stamps. They had $250,000. $60 billion, $250,000. I don't know how many people they think live in America, but that doesn't even begin. They're nickel and diming us. And then when you talk about children and families who are in fear of eviction, this means a great deal to children to be insecure about their housing. Some of them will become homeless. because the Republicans are nickel and diming our children. These families are crying out for the $600. They're nickel and diming the economic security of children's families. The list goes on and on. We are saying in our bill, children learning, parents earning. If we want parents to be able to go back to work, we need children to be going to school safely. And if they can't, and parents have to work, we want them to have childcare in a significant way. Don't nickel and dime us, our children, on the childcare issue either. So this, again, if you look at it and how people are affected by this, the families of our heroes. As I said earlier, healthcare, you know who they are: healthcare workers, first responders, transportation, sanitation, teachers. Probably 5 million of them will lose their jobs if we do not. It's already 1.5 million, projected to be 3.6 million. More people will lose their jobs if we do not honor our responsibility to state and local governments. These are people with children, with families. And what happens? They go on unemployment insurance. So what is saved there? What is saved there? What is lost is the dignity of work that these people have. Many of them risked their lives to save lives in this pandemic, and now they've lost their jobs. Why? Why? Because Mitch McConnell calls this what? Progressive wish list. Well, I do wish that we can protect our workers, we can feed our children, we can house our people, that we can have elections that enable people not to make a choice between voting and their health. With that, any questions you may have? Yes, ma'am.
2 questions. Mark Meadows says that you are trillions of dollars apart. Is that an accurate assessment on the state of the negotiations? And also, did you guys reject their offer of $400 a week of unemployment insurance?
We have said that we're going to have the $600. We have documented by Yale University, UCLA, and other authorities that this is necessary. Today, the University of Chicago put out what the cost would be to our economy if we don't have that $600 in terms of purchasing power and the rest. So it's not a question of, we, again, want to see a whole package, and they know that we want the $600. Do you want to speak to that, Mr.
Yeah,
Rudy?
I mean, there are a couple of points here. Number one, yeah, the $600 has kept, by economic estimates, at least 1 million and probably many more people out of poverty. Out of poverty. We're trying to lift people out of poverty. It's done it. Second, the number one probably motive engine that the economy isn't doing worse is consumer spending. One of the biggest incentives for consumer spending, additives to consumer spending, is the unemployment. But third, you change the rules. It will take weeks in some states and months in most states before new unemployment can be added. And that will hurt the economy dramatically. They say all these people are staying home because they get more money than if they go to work. That is not the American people I know. They want to work. And if they have a job or are offered a job, and with the benefits and with the dignity of work, they take it. But there's it's 11% unemployment. Not everyone who wants to work can get to work. So it's not that they're staying home because they're lazy. I mean, that's a very harsh view of American workers. They're staying home because they don't have a job. We're with the 600.
Yeah, here's the thing. When they come to the table and are like $600, how could it be? They're just demonstrating their condescension to America's working families. There are all kinds of reasons that weigh in on this pandemic. People have to stay home if their children are not able to go to school, or if they don't have childcare. There are a number of reasons, but none of them is, I want to stay home because I make more money this way than other. Maybe some of these employers can pay their workers more, but let's not, not to go to that place just because I wouldn't paint all of them with that brush. We shouldn't be worrying about how much it's going to cost. So I said to the secretary, the plural of anecdote is not data. You have some examples, write them down and let's add it up. And I'll show you my list of money that has been squandered, given to businesses who should not have gotten PPP and the rest. Why are we holding America's working families who are struggling, who have children to care for, or senior elders to care for, and the rest, and make it as if they're, my goodness, they're not worthy of this? And I always say to the American people, just take pride in who you are. And don't let them think that you're not worth what we're talking about here.
Why dismantle a program that almost all economists say is working
Okay.
and put something new in its place that will take months to go into effect?
3 months, at least in California, which has a relatively efficient system. Some places say they don't even know how they would get it to work. If it's either this or the greater or lesser of 70% of that, come on.
By the way, I don't even know if the $400 has the support of most Republican senators.
Did they
We
even
should
have the
ask them.
vote? They didn't even have the
They
votes
didn't
for
have it
200.
200.
They have it for 200.
So it's a game.
Nancy,
The White House says that the president is going to sign an executive order today requiring the U.S. government to only purchase essential medicines and medical supplies from U.S. companies. Do you have any reaction to that?
I don't even know what you're talking about. I mean, I know that he has all these schemes that he wants to make it look like he's trying to lower the cost of prescription drugs. The way to do that is to negotiate for lower prices. And that is in the HR 3 that we had passed, and then our ACA enhancement. So I think that I don't know what the president, I can't
Is this
speak to it.
about in general drug prices or just needed drugs for COVID?
Essential drugs and also medical supplies, so things like
So
masks
in other
and
words,
gloves.
if we don't have an adequate supply right now, I mean, we're all for Buy America. And he should have been doing that by invoking the DPA 4 months ago, and he wouldn't have had to do this when I asked him on, I think it was March 6th. But to say if there's an essential supply that's going to keep Americans alive and not get sick, and we're not going to buy it because it's overseas and we don't have having it made in America, that is harsh, callous, and wrong, and I'll bet he'll have to back off it.
Thank you. Good morning. The president and the administration have hinted at possibly doing some sort of executive action here if there's not a deal in the next few days.
And what is he going to act upon?
Well, that's what I'm asking about. I have been told that they might try to, and this is what they did with the border wall, move some money around, money that's been unallocated from the March coronavirus bill, something from the disaster relief bill. What would you think if they started to try, like they did with the wall, to move sums of money around without the blessing of the Congress?
I don't think they know what they're talking about. The one thing the president can do is to extend the moratorium. And that would be a good thing if there's money to go with it. And that's what we keep telling them. A moratorium, as the leader fully explained, what's the use of a moratorium if you're going to have 8 months of rent to pay at the end of the moratorium, A? And B, what does that mean to the landlord?
No money.
No money. Mr. Schumer grew up in a triplex, did you?
Triple decker.
Yeah. And you want to tell your story?
Oh, okay. We tell each other a lot of stories. You should have heard us singing before.
We did.
You did?
We can hear something out
Oh, golly. It was a song because she was putting on lipstick. And it was a song. I want to ask how many of you have ever heard of the song
they haven't heard of it.
Lipstick on Your Collar? Anyone hear of it? Raise your hands. Now, we are trying to figure out who sang it. Did you figure that out? Connie Francis.
Have you ever heard of her?
Where the Boys Are. That was one of her movies or songs. Now we're finished with our trivia. And
No, he grew up in a triplex.
So in my neighborhood where I grew up, there were lots of what they call triple deckers. And the landlord was the family. It was a working family that lived on the top floor. They owned the building. And then there was rent. There was a family on the second floor and the first floor that rented. Well, if they can't pay the rent, if they have a moratorium rent, how is that? This is not a big fancy landlord. This is a working person. He's not getting or she's not getting money to pay the mortgage, the electricity, the property taxes, etc. If you don't push money into the system, it doesn't work. But they tie themselves in a knot to act like they want to try to do something without spending any money. And it's impossible when you have such a huge recession and such a huge pandemic.
And on that vein, we're talking about when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was needed shelter, you sheltered me. When I was homeless, you sheltered me. We're talking about the Gospel of Matthew. We're talking about fundamental values in our country. They don't want to spend the money to feed adequate amounts of money to feed to alleviate food insecurity in our country. They don't want to give any money to help with possible evictions, which people are very, very afraid of. And that's instead, what do they want to do? Well, I always point out their commitment to the high end. They're a trickle down crowd. Pay nearly $2 trillion added to the national debt to give a tax cut to those 83% of the benefits going to the top 1%, heaping mountains of debt onto our children. And instead of making investments that will stimulate the economy, instead of, let me just say it this way, we have to think big. You ask the chairman of the Fed, you ask some of the economists, you ask some of the previous leaders in the Republican Party in the government of our country. Think big, because this is a big challenge and it will only get worse if we do not make the necessary investments. Pay now or pay later, much more later.
But to be clear, you don't think that they can move money around without congressional approval? They did it with the
We
voter
can't
roll.
move that much money. We're talking about
Better
a
way
major
to do this is
investment.
come to a agreement that meets the needs of the American people. Much better way.
Yes, ma'am.
Madam Speaker, thank you. I want to follow up to Leanne's question, first of all. Are you trillions of dollars apart? And then also, understanding that you see a scope problem and you want longer term benefits for more people. However, unemployed Americans have been without their $600 check for a week. They will go out without it again next week. Can you talk to them, and schools are getting ready to reopen? Do you think there is a possibility for any deal in the next few days that could help them plan for the money they could be getting?
Well, we like to do that, and that's what our discussions are about. But there are many needs, so we should choose school children and leave out starving families who can't feed their kids. We should choose renters and not choose businesses that need help, small businesses that need help. There's a broad scope of problems, and the worry we have is they'll want to do a little Band-Aid, as I said. Vote for one thing, skip out of town, and leave the rest behind.
And let me just say, I'm going to just make this point because you seem to be, with all due respect, using their talking point. The fact is, when they showed up last week, it was already too late to save the $600. Understand that. It was already too late to save the $600. And they went to the floor of the Senate and put $200 on the floor, which they don't even have the 51 votes on their own side, much less the 60 votes that they would need. So it would be over by now in a couple of days anyway. The point is that you must be comprehensive. You have to think big, and we cannot let them say, well, if you feed the kids, then you can't pay the rent. We're just not going to do that. But understand, this is the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans. They're a trickle-down crowd. If it trickles down and there's some benefit, that would be good. If it doesn't, so be it. That's the free market. We're a bubble-up crowd. We're investing in America's working families. And when we go to that table for this conference this afternoon, every time we go to the table, it's as if we're pulling up a chair to America's kitchen tables where people are trying to figure out how they pay the rent, how they can buy food, and you see food costs are rising, and that's even more expensive for America's working families. What are they going to do if the children can't go to school, or if they can, will they be safe? Can we have childcare adequately funded so that we get parents work earning, children learning? Thank you all very much.
Just one thing I want to add to that. Don't forget, we wanted them to start working on this months ago, long before the deadlines expired. They waited to the very moment, and they don't have any votes, hardly any, for $600. So that answers your question.
Are you trillions of dollars
Are you
apart?
ruling out a short-term extension if the talks collapse?
We're not having a short-term extension.
Thank you.
You are. So yes. You could say
Did she, wasn't she on here, Eric?